So, good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome to the animal ethics part of the DRD information series related to the functions of the DRD and how those functions impact on research ethics and integrity. And for this session, specifically focusing on animal ethics, or as we like to refer to it, animal care and use within Stellenbosch University. So today's session will be divided into 3 talks. We have myself, who is the coordinator for research ethics, animal use, biosafety, and permit compliance, that will give a brief overview of the animal care and use program as it is structured within the institution, and what mechanisms and processes are available to our researchers that are involved in the use of animals in research, teaching, or testing activities. Then we will have the chair of the ethics committee, animal ethics committee, who is Professor Dirk U Bellstedt, and he will specifically focus on the philosophical aspects related to the use of animals in research, teaching, and testing activities, i.e. ethics and integrity, and how the committee would review an application and provide some tips, if one could call it that, in terms of how to prevent unnecessary delays when it comes to your submission. Then we have Dr. Este Spies, Este Spies, yes, Este, your surname is Spies, yes. She is the director for the animal facility at the Tygerberg campus, but also at physiology on Stellenbosch campus. And she will talk to us about the various offerings that the animal facilities have available to researchers who are involved in animal work. But she will also touch on the necessities related to Section 23C of the Veterinary and Paraveterinary Professions Act that relate to the authorization of non-qualified veterinarians in terms of, or non-qualified veterinary persons in terms of doing procedures on animals. So without further ado, I will kick off. My presentation won't be that long, as I want to give more time to Dirk and Este to talk to us. So initially we had anticipated quite a larger number of people, but fortunately there are only about 12 or 13 of us in this training session. So that makes it easier for us to, handle the questions even during the presentation. If it's a pressing matter, alternatively, you can keep all your questions to the end. But if there's something that you really urgently need to clarify, you are more than welcome to raise your hand, and Beosha will alert us as the presenters to your question. So here we go. So the official name for the committee that is responsible for animal ethics at the institution is the Research Ethics Committee, Animal Care and Use. And this committee is a subcommittee of the Senate Research Ethics Committee that are responsible for the review of applications and research applications, teaching applications when live animals are involved. Whether that's for observation, whether you are doing invasive or non-invasive procedures with the animals, this is the correct committee that you would need to submit your ethics application to. So this is just for interest's sake. In 1995, they subjected spiders, NASA subjected spiders to a variety of drug types. As you can see there, LSD, speed, marijuana, caffeine. And they looked at how the spiders would spin their webs when hooked on these narcotics. And as you can see there, it's best to use marijuana as opposed to coffee. So if you have coffee in your hand now, just watch out. If you have to spin a web, it will look nothing compared to what would be normal. So why this picture? So obviously animals fall outside of the animal ethics review and approval process within this institution. but we need to think very carefully about what we try to test in live animal models and how that will affect them. And that's why this committee exists, to ensure that if you end up using animals in research, teaching, or testing activities, that you have clearly thought about what the effect of your procedure will be on the animals. And you need to justify, you need to put measures in place to prevent a variety of things that Dirk will unpack in his presentation. So we have the committee, but this committee and everybody that does animal work at the institution must comply with the policy for responsible research conduct. And this policy was previously referred to as the ethics policy, sets out how we go about doing research when we involve animals in our work. It does not only refer to animals, but the policy obviously touches on or expands on the use of animals, the use of biohazardous organisms within research, teaching, and testing, the use of humans and for social, behavioral, and educational research, but then also the use of humans in health research. So this policy framework is very clear that it, and I'll read the very relevant parts to you. And it says Stellenbosch University is committed to applying the values of equity, participation, transparency, service, tolerance, mutual respect, and mutual respect here to realize that you need to respect the animal that you are putting through this um, procedure, dedication, scholarship, and responsibility. So I'll touch on the responsibility a bit later on, but it is everybody's responsibility who are involved in the animal care and use program at the institution to make sure that the animals are not abused, that they, if they are involved in a study, that they, get the minimum or even more treatment, humane treatment that is warranted for their specific study. This policy is available on the DRD website, and I would urge you to have a look at it. It's not a Friday evening piece of reading material, but it could very well be a 15-minute over lunchtime that you spend on the bits that is relevant to you in terms of animals in this case. So this policy then also unpacks in terms of the establishment of an animal care and use committee that the institution must establish. And this committee need to be, is constituted in a specific way with regard to its members. So we have 4 member types. So we have a category A, which are our veterinarians. So this list is a bit outdated. So we have Este Spies, who is the veterinarian for the faculties of medicine and health sciences. We have Dr. Benny Grobler, who is the vet for the agri-sciences faculty. And then we have Dr. Ganinda Msiza, who's the state vet that also serves in our committee. Then we have a variety of academic experts from a number of faculties with specific expertise related to the committee and their function. Then we have a category C person, and that is the National SPCA. They represent the welfare organization. Then we have a community member who is Professor Sonia Maton. We've got nature conservation, and then we've got the Office for Research Integrity and Ethics staff that manages the committee. So as you can see, if your application is reviewed, it's not reviewed by administrators, but by competent, qualified persons within the field of that has been doing animal work and exposed to animal work throughout their careers. So whatever feedback we give is feedback, warranted feedback. So we have the policy, we have the committee, but then the committee need to use some reference document in terms of doing their reviews. And this document is the South African National Standard for the Care and Use of Animals for Scientific Purposes. A link to this document is available on our website. Unfortunately, our license agreement with the SABS only allows for 15 people to access the document at a time. But as soon as there's no activity, it automatically locks you out and somebody else can access this document. This is the minimum standard for the use of animals in research or teaching activities. And you as an applicant or proposed applicant should access this document during the course of creating or completing an application that will be reviewed by this committee, because this document is used to test your application with regard to how you are handling the animals, how you are treating the animals, and what you propose to do with them. So it is sort of having the answer before the test paper. So you should access the document before you submit your ethics application, because this will give you an idea of what the committee will look at in your application. An important definition relates to what is regarded as an animal that would form part of an ethics review according to the South African National Standard. And the definition of an animal starts out with live. So for ethics clearance, or for you to obtain or apply for ethics clearance, you need to have a live animal that you are planning to do work on. If it's a dead animal that has died due to old age, or that has been slaughtered at an abattoir, and you're only getting samples, tissue samples, ethics clearance is not required, but our committee has a short application process for the use of animal samples and animal fluids and those sorts of things. I have the definition there for you. Please go and have a look at what is included in the definition of an animal. So I'll briefly touch on the 3 R's. In the South African National Standard, there is a 4th R. I'll talk to you about that. So Dirk will go into much greater detail. So there are the 3 R's are replacement, reduction, and refinement. So replacement refers to the methods to avoid using a live animal. Reduction refers to the numbers of animals that need to be minimized so that you can use the least number of animals with still having statistical value. And then refinement broadly states that you need to refine your processes in such a way to cause the least amount of harm to the animal. And then the 4th R speaks about the responsibility. And responsibility from the perspective of you as a researcher, the responsibility of the ethics committee, the responsibility of the institution. And all those responsibilities link up to the overall responsibility towards the animals that are involved in any scientific investigation. So again, just replacement. If you don't need to use a live animal model, or animal don't use a live animal, the Department of Animal Sciences are fortunate to have 2 AI models, non-animal models that they've purchased. Daisy is the one's name. I can't remember the other. I don't know, let's call it a fake cow, but the other non-animal model. And that it's been working well for them. Reduction, as I said, the numbers are important, and that will unpack this in greater detail. Refinement, to refine your procedures in such a way to cause the least amount of harm, lasting harm, and or distress to the animal. And then important, applying for ethics approval. So there is one application system for ethics that's being used at the institution, and that's called Infonetica. So whether you apply for human ethics approval, animal or biosafety, you will use the same system. The difference is in the type or the form type that you complete. So you access the system in the same way, and you select the relevant form. Once you've completed the form and submitted it, it will come to our office. Beukes and I will then do an admin review, and if your application is complete, we will schedule it for a meeting and assign reviewers, and those reviewers will then review your document and provide feedback at the committee meeting where it's discussed. And once a final decision is reached, you will receive a feedback letter. either it's approved or there need to be changes need to be made to the application. What I think is also important for you to note is that your research project might require multiple ethics applications, especially if you're working with, for instance, animals that are infected with TB, then you would need to apply to the biosafety committee. Or if your application for human, you're taking samples, sputum samples from TB infected persons, you would need HREC approval, but also biosafety approval. So we've developed an infographic. It's available on our website. Please have a look at it just to make sure that you test this against your application so that you apply to all the relevant ethics committees that's relevant in your application. We would argue that submitting these, if you have 2 ethics committees that you need to submit to, you can do so at the same time and let the process run concurrently. We are in contact with one another, these ethics committees, so we would be able to liaise amongst ourselves in terms of making sure that the approval of one is subject to the approval of the other. And it also lists all the relevant persons who are managing these ethics committees. So the URL is there. So you apply ethics.san.ac.za. You use that URL for all ethics applications and you select the relevant form. We at the Animal Ethics Office are now fortunate to have Beusha Thompson, who has started last year as an intern to help with the administration of the Animal Care News program. So you are more than welcome to send Beusha an email asking how far is my application, what do I still need to do? And Beusha is very competent and will be able to advise you or assist you with any queries. Post-approval monitoring. The committee has a duty to conduct post-approval site visits to those applications that we've approved, just to ensure that what we've approved is actually being done. This is a process that we involve the researcher, the PI, principal investigator in of the project, in great detail. We schedule the visit, we have a discussion before we look at the procedures that you're conducting, and we have the reviewers with us who reviewed your application so that they can have an insight into what has been approved and how you are doing it. This is usually announced visits, but sometimes we have unannounced post-approval monitoring visits, but those are very rare. And this process is there to ensure greater assurance in terms of the proper treatment of the animals as based on the approval that has been granted. So I thought I would give you some tips that you can take away. So important is that submit your ethics application on time, and this is for all types of ethics applications. Do not wait for the day before the closing date and then you think you would be able to complete the whole application within 24 hours. Our system is designed in such a way that you can start the application and not finish it and go for a run and come back and carry on. So you have the option to access it multiple times before you submit. You can access it anywhere in the world, even if you're in an airport in Bali, you could very well complete your ethics application. So for students, discuss your ethics application with your supervisor before you submit it. And this is very important, that your supervisor and you talk through the ethics application before it's submitted. And again, this is valid for all ethics submissions. You are always welcome to contact our office to have a consult with us with regard to the application form. You can send us your research proposal. Beos and I will go through it and advise you. So that option is available. It will make the review of your application perhaps go smoother. What is important is that you check your spelling and language that you use in your application. It might sound mundane, but if your language is improper, it would be difficult for us to, determine what actually you want to do. Spelling, the system does have spell checks, so please use those spell checks so that your application doesn't contain unnecessary spelling errors. Our website is available on the DRD. It's part of the DRD's website, so the dates are there. Please access them. Go to the ethics application system, get to know it. You don't have to complete it and submit it, but start your application by going through all the various sections of the application form. Remember to use the SANS document when you draft your application, because there are vital information in the document that will really speed up the review process of your application if it's as complete as possible. And if you have to follow up, and this is rather important for me, if you follow up with our ethics office on the status of your application, follow up within 2 weeks after not getting feedback on a particular matter. Please do not wait 6 months to a year and then you say, okay, I need to submit my thesis now and I haven't heard back from the ethics office. I submitted my application in January of 2020. That is just going to cause stress on both ends. So please follow up immediately after you've not received feedback, let's say within a 2-week period. And then lastly, don't be stressed out about the process. As processes go, as administration go, it might look daunting, but it's actually not daunting. We are a kind and friendly bunch of people. So if you need to chat with us, you are more than welcome to do so, and we would be happy to assist or help you with whatever query you have related to animals, of course. And then that's my slideshow. So you are more than welcome to visit us at the Kurtua building. It's the Office for Research Integrity and Ethics. We're on the 2nd floor. You are also welcome to send us an email. There's our email addresses, Beukes and myself. Always happy to have a chat with you, always happy to advise you. And if need be, we can schedule a meeting. You come over to our office, we drink coffee, and we discuss whatever issue you have related to the use of animals in research, teaching, or testing activities. Thank you. I will now hand over to Professor Bellstedt, who will talk to us about the nitty-gritty of animal ethics. Over to you, Dirk. Thank you.
Winston, if there are perhaps any questions from the audience at this point, please go ahead.
Okay, do we have any questions? Beukes, you now need to guide me. Do we have questions in the chat?
There are no questions in the chat right now, but people are welcome to add those questions if they have any.
Okay. But if there are none, or you want to wait till the end, you are more than welcome to do so as well. Thank you, Dirk.
Right, so let me take over, and I might need some assistance, so let me just see if I can share my screen.
Yes, I can see it. Now you just need to click on presentation mode.
Okay. Right, does that look satisfactory?
Perfect.
Yes. So thank you very much, and I will proceed with my little contribution. So animal ethics approval. I've been performing animal research for a long time, somewhere since around about the 1980s, and I've been chair of the Animal Ethics Committee for the last 2 years, but I've obviously been involved in this for a long, long time, and I know what the process involves, and for that reason, I would like to give some outline today in my talk about this. So here again is the URL. You can find more information about the actual animal ethics process. There is a very nice little video which explains this, and that orientates one very nicely about what the process involves and what it's supposed to be doing. So Winston touched on this, and this is a very important basic underlying principle. The university is forced to regulate animal use, and therefore it is forced to have an animal ethics committee and to scrutinize applications. However, the idea is not that Stellenbosch University tries to regulate researchers. The idea is to support researchers that wish to perform animal experiments and not to be an impediment or to delay research. On the contrary, if we can facilitate that, it is constructive. We wish to support research and to enable research. As Winston indicated, don't, if you have put in an application, inquire a year or two later about why your research application wasn't attended to. Sometimes right at the end there is a submit button and you might have missed that. And so make sure that you discuss this with us so that the ethics approval is not an impediment to your research. As a matter of fact, it facilitates your research and it enables you to publish your research. So what is ethics? So ethics is a huge part of the field of philosophy as it is taught by the university. And this is not something that has happened overnight. Ethics and ethics considerations have been going on since the time of the Greeks. And for this reason, there is a huge amount of theoretical background. But in a very simplistic way, one can say ethics is the right thing or good thing to do when the things that we wish to do and that we have to do are in conflict. So we need to ask ourselves, can we justifiably do the experiments and treat animals in a certain way such that this is justified and that this is done in a humane manner, such that the damage that is done to animals is minimized and that it is done in a responsible manner. Now, we have undergone a lot of soul searching in animal research, and that is that we now define animals as sentient animals. Those are the ones that can sense what is going on around them. And these include all mammals, reptiles, amphibians, and fishes, as well as some higher urochordates. It does not include invertebrates or any microbes. It does not include plants either, and one could have a long debate about this, but these are the ones that we state can sense what is going on around them and have a higher nervous system whereby they can sense pain and a whole lot of sensations, and we do not want them to suffer as a result of this research. And as a result of that, we have come up with this definition of sentient animals. Now, there are a few very important considerations when it comes to animal ethics approval. How is an application assessed? We cannot assess the actual animal side of it without investigating the science. And as a result of that, what happens is that the committee will, the committee will actually assess the science as part of the animal use. And that is also why when Winston showed us the composition of the committee is composed of a number of experts in various fields in the natural sciences and in the medical sciences. And your application is therefore assessed also with regard to the science. And for that reason also then, in the application, a scientific motivation in which the most up-to-date literature is referenced must be given. You are given a there is a position in which you can make a scientific motivation and you give a scientific overview of the project. Now then, the numbers of the animals that you apply for must allow for statistically supported results and must be statistically valid. And this has got two sides to it. The one is that there should not be too many animals. You can prove something statistically by, let us say, using 30 animals, and you've got a treatment and a control group. This is the sort of thing that the Ethics Committee looks at very closely. And then in order to make a statistically significant decision, the committee will look at the statistics that you propose. And let us say it will decide, okay, 30 is a valid number for both the control group and the treatment group. However, if you apply for very, very few animals, like one animal in the treatment group and one in the control group, then the ethics committee will in actual fact say to you, no, but those are too low. You need to increase that. Because if you only have two animals and you mistreat them in the process, in actual fact, those results are not statistically valid and don't justify the use of the animals. So this goes both ways, and you do not need to be concerned about numbers, that this always just has to be very, very low. It needs to be adequate so that the results will be statistically valid. Then the committee assesses the application in the light of 5 freedoms and 3 R's, and there are more R's as well. Winston referred to some of the R's. I'm going to show the freedoms in a moment. And then, does the proposed use of animals conform to regulatory norms? Have the required permits been issued? And I'll give some greater detail about that as well. So the animals have the right to 5 freedoms, and the first 4 of these are in actual fact quite simple. The 5th one is the one which often leads to debate. Animals have to be kept such that they have a freedom from hunger and thirst. They have to have a freedom of pain, injury, and disease. They have to have freedom of distress, freedom of discomfort. And then the 5th one, they have to be capable of expressing behavior that promotes well-being. Now, when it comes to an animal ethics application, hunger and thirst are normally dealt with very easily in that free access to water and food is given. Pain, injury, and disease. The disease often is not a problem, but pain and injury, if you are going to perform some other procedure on the animal, then one has to ensure that pain and injury is minimized. And any constraint of animals can lead to distress, and also any treatments can lead to discomfort. So those are looked at very carefully, and those have to be motivated. And we list in the application quite a number of different treatments and different categories of treatments, different pain categories, and so on, so that we can assess this. But the final one, freedom to express behavior that promotes well-being, is one which is contentious. And in other words, do we almost expose animals or allow animals full freedom of movement and freedom to interact with each other? And this is in actual fact not feasible in an experimental animal situation. You can't have males and females together, and you need to control this, otherwise you would have a lot of interaction and fighting amongst the animals. So the last one needs to be looked at with care, and that is normally done then very carefully by the committee as well. Then the 3 R's, which Winston referred to: replacement, reduction, refinement, and then further responsibility, rigor, repetition, and one can carry on about this. In extreme cases where one has to weigh up harm versus benefit of an animal trial, We can do a so-called harm-benefit assessment. This is also something that animal researchers have given a lot of thought to. There are models for this, and one can weigh this up. And on occasion, when we have the feeling that this is to be debated, we do such things, and we actually try to get a figure for harm or figure for benefit, and we weigh up the two against each other. But these are debatable things, and these are the decisions that the committee then comes to. So replacement. So replacement of sentient animals, in other words, can you replace one of these animals with a non-sentient animal or a research model? And the most simple of these are, of course, can live animals be replaced with, for example, animal tissue samples? The easiest of this is, for example, a toxicity assessment where you can intoxicate live animals, but you can also do this on cell culture where you can see what the level of mortality of the cell culture is, and you do not have suffering of live animals. So these are relatively simple things, but certainly replacement is important. And then in replacement, is the animal model really a model that for what takes place in the human? Is the animal model valid? And there are numerous places where this is quite difficult, and where an animal model is in actual fact dubious as to whether it does cover what in the case of humans would apply. So these are also careful considerations that the committee needs to take. Then reduction of animals, as I explained to you, small numbers, but we do insist on numbers that are statistically valid. And the important thing is, if we are not sure, then we refer you to a statistician. And you are asked in any case in the application form whether you have actually consulted a statistician, but this is also done with considerable care. Then refinement. Will the housing be adequate, including food and safety, so that we can eliminate physical and experimental stress and thereby ensure humane and ethical treatment? So the housing is looked at very carefully in experimental animal models and in experimental research. This is precisely defined by the SANS document that Winston referred to. In the case of farm animals and in the case of wild animals, this is subject to debate, and which again the committee then considers very carefully. Then more R's, rigor. Does the experiment have a sound scientific base and clear aims and objectives? This is a very important thing. All trials must have clear aims and objectives. You can't just do a trial because you think it's going to give an interesting result. You have to clearly state what you're after. And then very often experiments are almost like repetitions of previous experiments. So that is why a literature review is important to actually, for us to establish whether this is a novel experiment and that it's not just a repetition. Researchers must take responsibility for their animal subjects throughout their experiments. This is not something that's handed on to a technician and someone who feeds the animals willy-nilly. This needs to be taken seriously, and the researcher has to take responsibility. And again, this is requested in the application process. Researchers must treat animals with respect. Because they are sentient, they are serving a purpose, and their living contribution here is something that must be valued. It can't just be made off to be as though this is another test tube. Then, as I mentioned, and as Winston mentioned, and I'm not going to go into this in too great detail because the document is built out in greater detail. The SANS document, as drawn up by the South African Bureau of Standards, documents and outlines precisely the requirements for all sorts of experimental animals. For wild animals, you cannot just simply do experiments on wild animals. You need permits from the relevant nature conservation authorities, such as Cape Nature or National Parks Board or other provincial authorities. And then there are regulations with regard to TOPS animals. TOPS animals are, for example, the big 5 and a few more, where special regulations apply and where you have to have permits from the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. Then for farmed animals, you have to remain within the Animal Diseases Act and the Meat Safety Act. And this often means that you have to have a so-called Section 20 permit. This is something that is also issued by Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development. And here you may need guidance. And again, the committee and Winston and Beukes can give you assistance. This is something that we have often found delays applications, and it's something that we try to assist researchers because this is simply a government matter and it's not easily obtained, unfortunately. Then for GMO animals, you need to be within the GMO Act, and you would also need to apply at the Biosafety Committee, as Winston also mentioned. Human diseases, again, medical human safety standards, you need to protect the researcher. And then very importantly, do researchers have the necessary training and approval to work on animals? And is SAVC authorization required? Este is going to go into this in greater detail. I won't expand on this now. So what will you benefit from this? You will receive advice about how to generate statistically valid research results. I think that's very important. You may receive support for how your research is structured and conducted. The committee has got many experts, and they can say to you, no, but we think that this would be better, and that procedure would give you a more accurate answer and will help you to refine your actual research trial. Then you also get an ethics approval number. This sounds somewhat irrelevant, but it's very peculiar when you want to publish research results in which you've done animal trials nowadays. Most journals require that you in actual fact indicate that you have ethics approval and that you in actual fact have an ethics approval number. So these are things that are not trivial. Then I want to importantly indicate what causes delays. Poor scientific motivation, a lack of logic and poor formulation, poor grammar and typographical errors. Unfortunately, we do receive such applications. Students must consult their supervisors. Supervisors can also consult the committee. Use your spell checker, use a proper motivation. Don't try to rush through the scientific motivation. It's very important that this be given properly. Then you may require training and SAVC authorization. Este will go into that. And that may require some months of training to gain proficiency. So you need to calculate that into when you wish to perform your trial. Obtaining Section 20 approval from Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development is often associated with delays. And again, we can assist you and we can inform you about whom to approach and how to approach the whole process so that you do not feel as though it's you that have to just apply to the department and government, that the university here is also giving you backing. And then obtaining permits from nature conservation authorities. As a matter of fact, we have conservation authorities that have representatives on the committee and are fully aware of these processes. And this is not something that's new to nature conservation. So this is something that actually works extremely well. And these permits can be obtained without delay. However, that needs to be done in line with your application. You don't have to have all these permits in position when you apply. You can say that you've got the application process that is in process, and we will then await to receive those permits and then give you the go-ahead and you can proceed. So these are processes that we try to let run in parallel to not delay your applications. And then the committee meets once a month. Urgent applications can be speeded up by so-called expedited reviews. The process is extremely well supported, and this I say with huge respect for the Division of Research Development. Winston Beukes, Biosha Thompson, and Mr. Aidan Williams, headed by Dr. Nicola Barsdorf, they all try their best. This is a support service from research development. It's not a hurdle. It's meant to assist you, and the process runs extremely efficiently. So this is really something that I can really recommend. So that's it. Questions are welcome. I will hand over after this to Este, but anybody that wishes to ask any questions is welcome to do so. Winston, are you there?
I am there. Thank you for your presentation.
Dear colleagues, just as a reminder, if you have any questions, you may place them in the chat and we will review them and discuss them after Este's presentation.
Thank you, Dirk. So if we don't have any other or any burning questions, we'll now hand over to Dr. Este Spies, who is the Director for Animal Facilities at the institution for the two faculties of Medicine and Health Sciences and the Faculty of Science. Este, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Winston. Thank you, Prof Bellstedt. I'm going to share my screen. Winston, can you just confirm if you can see it?
Perfect. Just add to slide mode. There you go. Thank you, Este.
Right. So I don't have a lot of time. I'm going to jump straight into it. I'm going to this morning talk to you a bit more about providing you the steps and the guidance on how to plan for an animal study. And I'm going to specifically focus on the process of South African Veterinary Council authorization. I want to first just start off with this, that proper and thorough planning when it comes to animal studies are the most important aspect to ensure that your study is going to be ethical. Proper planning not only produces good, reproducible scientific results, but it also at the end of the day ensures the good welfare of your animals. It's important to remember that this isn't cells or reagents or formulations or chemicals that you are working with. These are real, live, sentient beings that can feel and experience stress and pain, and they deserve to be treated with the respect and the dignity that they deserve. The consequences of bad planning or poor planning when it comes to animal research are serious, and in some cases, it can lead to the unnecessary death of innocent animals. I'm not going to go into the 3 R's. We are now all well aware of the 3 R's of animal research. I just want to mention a new R that was recently recognized and added, and that is the most important R in my opinion, is responsibility. If you follow this on, if you take full responsibility for the lives of the animals in your projects, then it's sort of all of the other R's are going to follow automatically. We need to accept this enormous responsibility and this privilege that we have been given to use animal lives in research so that we can gain knowledge for the betterment of society and humankind. And if we take full responsibility for this privilege, then we will conduct well in good and proper and ethical animal research. So I'm going to focus today on giving you a few steps on how to plan and how to approach an animal study, and as well as the expected timelines. And I will go through all of them now and discuss them in more detail. So firstly is please contact your animal facility and set up a meeting where we can discuss your project. So this is just an informal discussion where we can talk about your idea and what you are planning to do, and we can provide you with some information, what you might need going forward, in your project, for example, the types of animals or the specific strains of animals that you might need that will be better for your project, the basic costs involved, the type of equipment that you might need. Do we have the facilities that you require to conduct this project, and also the best methods that they are to perform certain procedures. I'm not going to go into ethics application again. This was covered thoroughly by my colleagues. I just want to say one thing, and that is about the tissue notification that Winston touched on. So it's very clear that each and every project and study and practical and demonstration and workshop that uses live animals requires ethical approval from the Animal Ethics Committee. But it is just worth noting that if you are going to use dead animals from an abattoir sample or animals that were euthanized in our facility, even if it's for a different project that has approval, you do need to apply for a tissue notification. It's not a full ethics application. It is just a notification where you inform the ethics committee that you are using these animals. Where did you get them from? How were they killed or euthanized? And how are they going to be exposed of? And all of this is also available on the online profile. Then your next step is to apply for your approvals. I'm not going to say anything about the Section 20, the permit that sends shivers down every researcher's spine. My advice is just that if you are unsure if you need Section 20 for your animal project, you probably do. And if you are unsure, I would recommend to contact DALA directly and just ask them questions. They are usually quite helpful in answering questions. So this is what I want to focus on today, and that is applying for SAVC authorization. So the SAVC is the South African Veterinary Council, and they are the governing and regulatory body for the veterinary and paraveterinary professions. So according to the Veterinary and Paraveterinary Act, only individuals who are SAVC registered are allowed to practice and perform veterinary and paraveterinary procedures on animals. So these are individuals who studied and obtained a qualification, a degree, a diploma, or certificate in any of the veterinary and paraveterinary professions. So specifically veterinarians, lab animal technicians, vet nurses, your veterinary technologists, and veterinary physiotherapists. But then the Veterinary Council recognized that there is a need for other individuals in other fields to perform certain veterinary and paraveterinary procedures to fulfill their duties. And therefore, they have decided to grant the authorization to certain people to perform specific veterinary and paraveterinary procedures. So this is, for example, our researchers and students at the university who are not registered as veterinary and paraveterinary professionals, but they need to do certain procedures in order for them to complete their research projects. So what does SAVC authorization mean? So this means that any veterinary and paraveterinary procedure that you need to perform for your project, for example, injections or getting medication, all of those, you need to get permission and authorization from the SAVC to do so. And this is just to ensure that those who perform procedures on animals have undergone the proper theoretical and practical training to make sure that you are competent in performing these procedures in animals and that you are doing it the right way and treating them the right way and ensuring their welfare. There's also a requirement from the SAVC for anyone who applies for authorization that they had undergone a proper animal ethics training course. As some of the procedures that you will be performing for your project also involves the use of Schedule 5 and 6 medication, legally this needs to be very strictly monitored and regulated, and that is another reason why applying for SAVC authorization is so important. In SAVC authorization, it's important to know it's not a blanket term. So the SAVC authorization does not mean that you can perform any procedure on any animal in any way you want. It means you get authorized to perform a specific procedure as approved in your protocol by the ethics committee on a certain species, for example, only rat or only mice, and only for a certain project at a specific facility, either Stellenbosch or Tygerberg, at an institution. So if you do have authorization to perform intraperitoneal injections in rats, then you cannot perform intraperitoneal injections in mice. However, once a person does have SAVC authorization, it is easy for us to apply for extension of your conditions by adding other procedures or other species after you have completed the necessary training and competency assessment. Another example, if you are authorized to perform intraperitoneal injections in rats at UCT, you are, for example, not allowed to perform any procedures at the University of Stellenbosch, and we need to apply for a completely new application. So how do we apply for SAVC authorization? The SAVC has 3 registration and authorization meetings per year. They usually occur in April, July, and October. And this is where they decide if they are going to grant applicants authorization. And that is another reason why planning is very important. You only have 3 opportunities per year to apply for SAVC authorization. Usually about a month or 2 months before these meetings, the animal facility hosts training sessions. They are usually a week long, and we include theoretical, ethical, and practical hands-on training. At the end, we do the competency assessment and submit your SAVC application. Then once you obtain your SAVC authorization, you need to pay a maintenance fee every year to maintain your authorization. If you don't, then we have to do everything over again. Every 6 months, your veterinary supervisor needs to submit a report to say that you are still competent and you are still involved in research. So I need to do this every 6 months for the 46 researchers that I supervise at the university. And you also need refresher training and recompetency assessment every 3 years for difficult procedures and every 5 years for the easier, more basic procedures. So I just quickly want to cover some of the questions that I get asked most frequently about SAVC authorization. So the first one is, for which procedures do I need SAVC authorization, or do I need SAVC authorization for this? And the answer is yes. You need authorization for all veterinary and paraveterinary procedures that you are going to be performing in your project. This excludes any animal husbandry, for example, cleaning cages, feeding of the animals, weighing animals, and even welfare monitoring. Although in these cases, we still require basic training and a competency assessment. And that competency assessment certificate can be submitted with your ethics application to the Animal Ethics Committee. Another question I get asked very regularly, and it causes a lot of confusion, is if someone did the UCT course, do they still need to apply for SAVC authorization? And the answer is yes. The UCT course is an excellent introductory course in lab animal science, and they cover animal ethics in depth. And there's a practical component where you are exposed to basics, procedures, for example, handling and restraint of animals, and subcutaneous and intraperitoneal injections. But the UCT course does not include a competency assessment by a veterinarian who is going to act as your supervisor, and an application is not submitted to the South African Veterinary Council to grant you authorization. It also does not include all the procedures that you might require to perform in your project, for example, anesthesia or euthanasia. So basically, if you do ever have the opportunity to attend this course, it's well worth attending. However, you will still need to undergo project-specific training and competency assessment at the University of Stellenbosch. Then another question I get asked is, if someone is not yet sure of exactly what procedures they will be doing for their project, and they ask if I can just do the basic general authorization training in the meantime. And there's unfortunately no such thing. So as mentioned, if SAVC authorization is not a blanket term, term, you need to apply for a specific procedure which was approved in your project proposal at the Animal Ethics Committee for a specific species at a specific institution. So we can't apply for authorization just for general anesthesia or general euthanasia. We need to specify exactly the type, the method, the way, the drugs that you are going to require. So it's important to make sure exactly how you are going to perform the procedures which is best for your project, and then we train you on those. Next, you need to think about your budget. So animal projects are surprisingly expensive. Therefore, to avoid any surprises, discuss these costs with the animal facility that will be hosting your project beforehand and make sure that you have enough funds. We run huge expenses to maintain our facility according to regulations and minimum standards and caring for our animals. And unfortunately, it has happened in the past where after a study is complete, where projects don't have the funds to pay us, which leaves us in a very difficult situation, as we have already incurred all the costs. As you can see, there's a lot of costs that are involved in maintaining these facilities and the animals. Then plan your calendar. So your calendar is very important. Sit with us, discuss your proposed schedule and your start dates. Remember things like gestation period of your animals. Rodents are pregnant for 3 weeks and we wean them at 4 weeks old. So this is another extra 7 weeks that you need to plan for in your project. We, as part of our ethical animal management practices, we don't breed animals continuously. This will just lead to unnecessary wastage, and we only breed on demand. It's also important to add your acclimatization period. So this is an incredibly important period which will help you and your animals to get used to each other, and it reduces stress when you are handling them for procedures, and it limits the amount of complications. You also need to remember that there are other projects at the same time as your project in these facilities, and there are limited staff to assist. There's limited equipment available, for example, biosafety cabinets, procedure rooms, anesthetic machines, and therefore this needs to be planned and booked in advance. Then together with your calendar, after your ethics approval, you fill in a request for use form and submit this to the relevant facility. This just helps the facility to host your project and to make sure that we have enough space for you, make sure that we are available to assist you with procedures or any training that you might need. And then last but not least, after everything has been completed, after you have all your approvals, all the permits, training has been done, authorization has been granted, you have all your formulations that you need to test, then only do you order your animals from the facility. Once we start breeding, there is no stopping, there's no going back. So everything needs to be ready beforehand. Thank you. I just want to add that our lab animal technician and I are very involved in most of the projects in our facility, and we are always willing to help. So researchers or students don't need to do everything by themselves. If they don't feel confident to do a certain procedure, rather don't do it and ask us to assist. A lot of researchers or students sometimes prefer us to perform a certain procedure, especially when it comes to difficult and complicated procedures that might have consequences, and or something like euthanasias. And we are always happy to help and assist. It's our job, and that's why we are here. So please feel free to contact us anytime. Thank you.
Thank you, Este. Colleagues, I hope you have had a good overview of the Animal Care and Use program at the institution, specifically focusing on the various aspects that make up this program. And you now have the opportunity to ask us questions or comment on some of the aspects. So please feel free to do so. We have Professor Steyn that wants to say something. The floor is yours.
Thanks. I just want to ask a question. we've heard about the SAVC authorization for procedures. Now, we mainly want to use anesthetized animals to train surgeons on emergency surgery, which is something that we need to do in a beating heart circulation situation, and unfortunately can't always be done on a non-living animal. So, but now what if we had to get authorization for the procedure, because now we have an anesthetized animal and we're teaching various procedures, surgical procedures. Is that does that come into this now, or did I misunderstand the SAVC authorization aspect? Thank you.
Thank you. Este, I think this is one for you.
Thank you. Hi, Prof Stein. So with the SAVC authorization, when there is a veterinarian who is supervising the animal procedure, for example, the anesthetics, and the people who are performing the procedures, specifically now referring to doctors and specialists, and they are registered with the HPCSA, they are allowed to perform procedures on animals if it's in their field of expertise. So, for example, if it is a surgeon and they are teaching surgery, then and there is a veterinarian there, then you don't need SAVC authorization. If there's not going to be a veterinarian attending and supervising, then there is an option that you can apply. It's a category E application at the SAVC where you apply for authorization. We'll be able to perform procedures on animals without a veterinarian present.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Este, for that clear-cut answer. Thank you for the question, Professor Stein. Any other questions, colleagues? You have the opportunity now to speak to these wonderful colleagues, excluding myself. So please go ahead. If we don't have any questions, allow me to again highlight the fact that you are always welcome to contact us via email or telephone or pop into our offices to have a chat with us. We would be certainly excited to welcome you and discuss your query. So if there is no other questions or comments, I would like to thank you for offering up your lunch hour to listen to what we have to say. And going forward, we are looking forward to your applications as they are going to be submitted to the Animal Ethics Committee. So thank you, colleagues. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.